Welcome to Shadowshiver, a podcast that tells real or imaginary horror stories. It's up to you, believe it.
Welcome to Shadowshiver. Here are 4 stories. For the no sleep subreddit number 1, I thought which isn't mine passes through my head. I have been ordered by my doctor to write down my observation on any thought that goes through my head that isn't my thought. I don't know why I get thoughts going through my head that aren't mine, but I really want to find out. I'm quite scared writing this, but it's definitely something that I have to do. Observation 1. I thought went through my head that wasn't mine. My body and mind didn't produce this thought. It was an alien thought of some sort, but where did it come from, and why is it going through my mind? My observation when this alien thought was going through my mind was the reality bended a little. Tables and furnitures were bending. It was a weird moment. Solid objects bend mean even people were bending, and I wasn't shocked that I wanted it to stop. But alien thought was going at a slower pace through my mind. It was like it was doing it on purpose. When it eventually passed, everything went back to normal, and I was relieved. I was so grateful to have my thoughts which my mind was creating. They went through my head. I started touching things, and there was the little heat being given off. Observation to an alien fog, which wasn't mine, was passing through my head. If it wasn't mine, then what was it, and why did weird things happen at the time this alien thought was passing through my head? People were dancing in impossible ways. They were not dancing in a sense, but we were moving so weirdly against the flow of nature. They were in the air and in other positions, which was not possible by our science. Then mother was screaming and laughing. Half her face was laughing while the other half was crying. This alien thought was taking its damn time to pass through my mind, and I was trying to force it to go faster by my willpower. It eventually passed, and everything went back to normal. I was sweating and breathing heavily. No one knew what just happened for a while, though it was as if I was able to see the after effects of what should have happened next. If this alien thought had stayed in my head much longer, it disappeared into the air. Observation 3. When the alien thought that didn't belong to me was passing through my mind, my thoughts tried fighting with it. Then my body seemed to have had a force around me moving me down. The mother and father, as well as my sisters, trying to pass through each other as if they were a ghost, but kept on failing. The invisible things keeping me down threatened tell me to tell my thoughts to stop fighting. Overbearing father passing to run away. I did meet old man Latonia wants to look at me. My father passed through in that my family seemed to us through each other at ghosts, didn't go through the floor into darkness. Then when it passed, I returned to reality. But when I touched old things, it was like reality was taking its time to harden again. And I had observed that my reality seemed to be affected by this alien thought, which wasn't mine. Maybe it's from another reality, or some aliens may be sending it again. Nobody knows. Observation for what I observed this time when the alien thought was passing through my mind was that it hated me. It was causing me pain. And for some reason, I grabbed my mother's hand and started swinging her around in the air. And when I looked outside, everyone was swinging someone around. And then it changed to someone different. It was incredibly random and strange. I was in great pain the whole time. I haven't got a chance. As I was gasping from the pain, he was on the floor watching people swimming something like a kite. I did feel that ancient food being a thought, which is entwined. I then got up and grabbed a knife. I was talking on another in the past screaming matches they gave me, but the reality was now effective and became real in my reality. My mother went to a hospital for all the cuts I gave her to be treated, never sent to a psychiatrist. I tried explaining it to him about the part which isn't that I'm coming from my head to describe the alien thought, which isn't money. I even once called it an immigrant thought. I didn't really know how to describe it, but he failed trying to tell me what was wrong with me and what I needed. I then went to the doctors again, and then got my head scanned once again. There was no unusual activity, but he told me to always keep on observing what I see when thoughts that haven't been produced by me go through my mind. Observation 5. It happened again, and this time everything was ending. Everyone was moving in weird positions and faceless. Everything was going through each other like a ghost, and literally everything was everything else. All the time, is like a bit of ritual like this. Every thought which isn't mine was doing it. It was observation 6. Something totally random have been this time when I saw the different reality, this alien thought passing through my mind. I saw a theory of our existence, and I literally lived it. They called it the ring theory, and Jupiter's rings Howard Circle planet. We're all in a sense of rock's earthly life or specific universe. Sometimes the circle breaks in someone joining the news, certainly no directed another universe. No need to be a part of that circle. Benedict Williams. They've got angry and had attacked me father couple times. Say look, my mother and sister, I have broken things. And I just don't know how to explain it, what makes sense of it. Chill doesn't matter when it says this man. I occasionally drive between where I live in Nebraska and the spots in Illinois where various family members live. If you have taken that journey, you'll know there's a whole lot of nothing out that way. I was the corn state for a reason. But maybe if you've taken the same route I have, you'll be able to lend some credence to this first-hand account of paranormal happenings. My father was in a sorry state. He was sick, and they weren't sure he had very long, so I had to be there. And that's how I found myself on my midnight trip across Iowa, something I always wanted to avoid. I'd seen enough deer on the side of the interstate to know they had a habit of just jumping out in the wrong time, so I kept my eye out, made sure to be extra cautious, because I doubted my tiny hatchback's ability to withstand a deer attack. And 2 hours into my trip, I realized that I was the only vehicle that I could see. I didn't know how long you'd been that way, but it was a bit unsettling to say the least. I wrote it off as plausible, however, because it was a weekday night, but once I'd explained that oddity away, I noticed another speed limit sign coming up. Normally they'd limit us somewhere between 70 and 80 miles an hour on the interstate, but not this one. The speed limit, none, minimum 100. And that has to be fake. I fought one heel, so I checked my speed limit when it happened, and continued on. But now I was a bit on edge, but still hadn't been another car, and it'd been at least 10 minutes. Not unheard of, but not what I wanted right now. I wanted to see another car going at an acceptable speed in another direction, or not acceptable, so I could at least follow the last sign's rules. I stopped thinking about that. The next sign, chemo next exit, anything you need. The sign looked completely believable, and I judged where I was in my route, and I could faintly remember an exit coming up, but cool words, things like that. It was extremely unsettling. I picked up my phone to pause my music, so I could focus better on what was going on, because another sign was coming up. It was bright orange, and I wondered how it hadn't noticed it sooner. Next exit closed. Part of me was thankful that I wouldn't have to make the choice to exit. I almost felt tangible relief, like a weight had been lifted off my mind. Why weren't there any other cars? Still, I tried to push that out of my mind as another speed limit sign came into view. It was the same as the one I'd seen earlier. I called that good enough and made the decision to accelerate, but suddenly I realized how exhausted I was. Driving in the middle of the night wasn't such a great idea. I reflected, especially after a full workday. I was honestly thinking about pulling over, parking, and knocking out there, until I saw another sign, no stopping for any reason, next blank miles. At that moment, I felt the first traces of genuine fear. The exhaustion faded away, and I floored it. I'd never seen a sign like that. And I know in all my trips, I would have noticed. How would they even enforce something like that? And that one was definitely fake, but I took it as holy advice. I raced him. I understood at this point. I don't know how much time had passed. I was working, but I couldn't remember when I'd left or what time had been. 5 minutes ago, 10 minutes ago, but I drove for what felt like an eternity, trying so hard to avert my gaze from signs, but I couldn't, and they made things worse. Next exit, anything you want on the interstate. I was starting to panic. Stop, just I fought, or maybe shouted, stop, 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 stop. I realized my music was too loud, but I'd remembered I turned my music off. I'd like to find the road to my phone, and then for my phone to the rearview mirror, and there, shrinking as I raced away from it, was a silhouette of a man with 2 long arms, and as you could see straight through where I should have been. I watched until I couldn't anymore, until it was just a speck way off behind me, and then I put my eyes back in the room down by my car. My windshield caught some blood, even though her whole body went under the car, bounced violently, worse than any bump I'd ever experienced. I was shuddering, shaking as I took my foot off the gas, thinking back. If I had hit the brake, I doubt I'd be recounting this to you. There on the side of the road was another sign, one of many, but I owe my life to no braking. When I put my foot back on the gas, I looked in the rearview mirror again. Once I realized I wasn't going to stop, it gave up a trade. It came off the ground as if someone above it was pulling it up by strings. It stood there and just stared, just like the one before that first one appeared alongside it. Before I wore my gaze away and focused on the road again, no screaming pedestrians that time. Thankfully, I didn't take my foot off the gas for a long time. The next business that I came across was room. I didn't slow down until I saw a second one, but I knew I was safe by then. Why? Because after the first one, it was a big one. Sun relief watched over me as I read it, and I nearly shed tears of joy. The 3 words plastered onto it will stay with me forever, and drive safely. Number 3, the Rosemary Drive incident. Even though I didn't instantly experience this, it still shakes me at night, and I question if I'm safe in my own house, though I'm miles away from where this incident took place. Back in 2001, there was a particular case that surrounded an upper-class neighborhood in Newnan, Georgia, and that still remains unsolved and still terrifies everyone. Rosemary Drive was the way the crime took place. According to the reports, it was around 11:15 p.m. on November 28, when neighbors started to hear strange sounds coming from one of the houses down the street. Some just thought it was a bunch of teenagers partying, but all of the lights were off in every house down the road. Fast forward to 12:35 a.m., where the neighbors are awoken to a guttural, indiscernible scream. People ran to lock their windows, but some ran to lock their doors and fear that something horrible was taking place outside their house at this point, and the police were contacted and sent to search the area for evidence of anything suspicious. They went to each house, knocked on the door to see if the residents were okay, and just followed standard procedures. One family didn't answer the knocks. The police gave the officer requested backup after he claimed to have noticed something suspicious about the house. Having his partner checked, the remainder of the house's backup finally arrived 10 minutes later, with my uncle being one of the officers on the scene. They knocked again, searched through the windows and everything, but still no sight of anyone in the house. It was impossible to get to this second or third story given the design of the house. The owner's cars were in the garage, but this is where they noticed something that indicated that someone was in the house. The garage door that was completely shut at the time when the first officer arrived was now completely open, with just enough space for someone to crawl through. The officer's mind with themselves, thinking they may be dealing with a break-in, and the perpetrator may have escaped. 9 officers searched the neighborhood, telling everyone to get back in their homes, while the remaining officers entered the house. After opening the garage door entirely, they headed straight for the door and found themselves in a small hallway between the foyer and the dining room. My uncle called that to see if anyone was there, walking through the house and expecting the worst. Whoever opened the garage door could be long gone, but the safety precautions still needed to be followed. No one was on the first floor. Heading up the stairs, shining their flashlights, they find a metal object laying on the floor. Approaching the object, the features of the device became clear. It was revealed to be a strange-looking tape recorder. There was a tape still in it, and reeked of some chemical that was freshly rubbed onto it. And the rest of the officers searched the remaining rooms of the house, with my uncle and the other officers staying, and listened to what was on the recording playing. The tape, they heard something that said strong chills down their backs. The tape recording was comprised of another that laughter, the each second of laughs getting stronger and stronger, to something that later the residents described as being in same size as the confederal of the laughing was so intense that whoever was nearly choking the left, transitioning into screams before back to laughter again. They never found the family that resided in the house, but one of the rooms thankfully contained some evidence. Upstairs on the 3rd floor, one of the bedrooms was completely trashed, broken lamps, fallen pictures, some blood stains on the floor. There seemed to have been some kind of struggle between the trespasser and one of the victims. Unfortunately, after testing the blood later, it would prove that it wasn't that of the trespasser, though I think his/her title has evolved past that of trust trespasser. Not a single person. Her body was found at the scene. The family that resided in the house was the Spencer family. According to the neighbors and friends, they were nearly perfect in every sense of the word, all 5 children being academic successes, with the eldest receiving several scholarships, an early admission to Stanford at 17. The parents, Edward and Lydia, owned their own law firm and was heavily involved in local charities. So this begs the question, who would want to harm them? They apparently had no enemies. They befriended practically everyone they knew. Months have passed, and still no updates or news that would lead to the family or their kidnappers' whereabouts. There was speculation that Edward and Lydia were secretly embezzling money and, with mounting evidence, decided to up and leave with their children. But those claims don't match the evidence found at the crime scene a few years later. In 2005, the police received another call. A woman was frantically telling them to get to the Rosemary Drive immediately, and that her son had been attacked, arriving on the scene at 6:23 p.m. The officer approached a woman and her son, telling the officer that someone was in the house and chased her son out of it, and it was a Spencer house. After conducting an investigation, nothing was found, and the house had been abandoned since the incident. So who could it have been? The boy admitted he always wanted to explore the house and see if the killer was still in there. Upon entering and exploring the first floor and finding nothing, she ran upstairs to see what new findings awaited him. She noticed a thumping noise that was coming from down the hallway to the east, but didn't think much of it. After leaving one of the bedrooms, the slide-open closet door was slightly ajar. Now there's worried. The boy with him, slowly backing out to the nearest staircase, slams the closet door open. Impossible. The boy was lucky enough to have made it down the stairs and out the front door. The being didn't pursue him past the door, but still no prints, no strands of hair on the scene to help think whoever this was to the disappearance of the Spencer family. Who was this person, and how have they not dropped the single shred of evidence from 2006 up until 2016? No one calls came in every now and then from the Rosemary tribe about someone staring at them through the various windows, seeing nothing but a pair of eyes that are open so wide it's not humanly possible. The Spencers are presumed dead, but some officers, family members and locals are donating and taking donations to continue the investigation. Maybe one of the recent calls about the pair of eyes will lead to the capture of this disturbed individual. That's all I know about the story. My uncle passed away in 2014 of natural causes, but up until then he didn't bring up the case. After telling me about it that one time, he told me that the screaming laughter from the tapes still haunted him. I couldn't imagine living in constant fear like many on the scene or in the neighborhood still live with. But recently I've been seeing a pair of eyes from my kitchen window. Though what happened to the Spencer just happened far away from you. Could that guy be at other places other than that area, stalking or kidnapping other people? Could those eyes be number 4? What goes on in looks in between my field missions? I sift through hours of audio and video recordings on sites like YouTube and Reddit to try to test their validity. On this latest validity grind, I decided to delve into the dark web just to see what I could find. Regretfully, I found a video that I can say is true. The video was clearly shot on a phone due to its low quality, and I had to manually turn up the brightness to see all the details. It starts in a car with 3 people whose names I can't release, and as far as I can tell, the victims are 1 male and 2 females of college age. They state that they are going camping in an undisclosed location. We're currently carpet bombing the area to try to exterminate the creatures, and that it has an abnormally high disappearance ratio, which is part of the reason they went well. The first few hours run eventful. There were a few things that seemed out of place, to say the least. There are always 2 or 3 small grey creatures in every frame that seemed to be watching the campers. Well, I expected the video to jump forward in time. Constantly the camera person was constantly recording, even late into the night at 3 a.m. Things started to get weird. The creatures from before started walking into the campsite. It didn't take me long to realize that they were a mutated subspecies of humanity called the Greys. In confusion, I called her agency's expert on human subspecies, and even he didn't have a good explanation for why they were there. Well, the strange thing about the Greys' behavior is that they weren't there to scavenge for food. They just sat there and watched the campers for hours. After the first day went by in the recording, I had about 20 other agents watching with me, and we all had one question on our minds: and what are the Greys doing at 5:45 am? All of the Greys ran for the trees, and we didn't see any more in the background until midday, and that's when the campers started to hike for the next campsite, to about 8 miles north, and that's when we noticed the Greys were watching them again, but in greater numbers of 4 or 5. When the campers arrived at the next campsite, the Greys disappeared again and wouldn't return until 12 that night. When they came back, and they encircled the campers and began enchanting, is the best way I can put it. This went on for 2 hours, and then 3 Greys knelt down beside the campers and stayed that way until 6 o'clock. When the campers woke up, they were surprised to see that their mosquito bites formed in elaborate circles, and the folks didn't realize they were in danger. The next 2 days, the contrast steadily moved north, and the number of grades increased exponentially. On the 5th night, the campers met with some friends that were taking a different route. After exchanging greetings, they talked about the weird mosquito bites they had, and they stayed up well past 2 o'clock and got incredibly drunk. So they didn't even notice that they were being watched. Eventually, the campers passed out from the copious amounts of alcohol they had consumed, and that's when the Greys moved in. They quickly dragged off all the campers to some form of a hive. The campers were encased in gel and left for the next day. One by one, the campers woke up and began to panic about their situation. When all the campers were awake, the greens came back. An organic fort tube was pulled out of the wall and stuck into the other group of campers. Apparent orange liquid filled the tube, and the other group was left to watch their friends slowly and agonizing the change into grades. After a day, the other group of campers were cut down and joined the group of preys in another January. The original group cut down and led into the main cave. She managed to escape and make it several miles away from the cave. Her fatal mistake was to stop moving at night. As soon as she stopped, the grades were planar. They cut the tendons in her left leg and broke her spine. The next frame showed it hand grabbing her head and dragging him screaming away into the darkness. Looking up from the video, we called her director and told him what we just saw. The next day, we saw in the news a massive wildfire, and our director sent an email saying this situation had been taken care of. I only enjoyed.
Thank you so much for listening. And if you liked this story, subscribe to our channel, leave a like, and see you next story.